Welcome to Horror Movies and Beyond. I'm your host, Ivotres Littles, and this is Shudderary, where we go behind the screens of Shudder original and exclusive movies. Today, I have two amazing guests, Aaron B. Koontz and Cameron Burns, who created a fun, nostalgic horror anthology, Shudder original movie, Scare Package 2, Rad Shad's Revenge. Hi, guys.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be back on here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That was, wait, when was that? A few years ago?
A couple years ago.
You've done this before?
I did. We talked about the Pale Door. We talked about the Pale Door when that came out.
The Pale Door and Scare Package.
Yeah, I did a little bit of both. Yeah, a little of both.
Yeah.
It was great.
Very cool. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be making it the first
time. And recently, you guys didn't do it, but Revealer was part of your production team, right?
Yeah, I was a producer on that as well. And yeah, we've had Revealer and then Blood Relatives we produced together as well. So then we have another movie called Sorry About the Demon coming out in January. So yeah, we've been, it's everything we did over a very compact period of time is all releasing now. So it's a little crazy. Yeah.
Man, you guys stay busy, which is great. So watch that film, and I was sitting there and I was just laughing, and it had so much nostalgic feeling to it, and it just brought back memories. I had shed a tear because I remember watching like the reference towards the movies that it was doing. I was like, oh my God, it was so little. I'm so old now. And the way you guys did it, produced it just, you wanted to go back and see the films that they were referencing, so, and then the highlight, the way people wrote it and really focus on some of the comedy elements, even though the movies most of them didn't have the comedy elements, but it just made it like, okay, this part's totally ridiculous, but it just makes sense and you could just laugh at it, and it was such a great time.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's a big part of what we were trying to do. I think it's a kind of a comedy first, than even a horror film, because it's so ridiculous. But there are so many horror references in there, and Cameron and I have talked about this, is we do have a hope that someone, you could be watching it with someone else and you're getting all the references, but your friend or partner maybe isn't. And you're like, no, that's from Hellbound, or that's from Dream Warriors. And then what happens is now those people get exposed to those movies as well. And we're continuing to kind of evangelize these movies that we grew up on. So that's kind of this like fun side effect to what's going on. And I'm glad you led with that because it's important to us.
Yeah, it's tough to hit that sweet spot where you want people to be in on the jokes and be like, oh, I get that Easter egg, but you also don't want to just confuse the people who haven't seen that stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's a delicate balance, trying to figure out how far is too far and how many references is too many. And so far we just keep saying, I guess we'll just keep adding more until someone tells us it's too many.
Yeah.
Okay, but before we get started, I just want to let everyone know out there will be some spoilers. We won't spoil it for you too much because we definitely want you to check it out and check out the first one as well, that relates to this one. But there will be some spoilers, so I just want to throw it out there. So each segment was so interesting and so fun. I have to say, the first one, Welcome to the 90s, when I was watching that, I was just like, oh, because some of them are my favorite heroines that's in there. I mean, Ellen, I love Aliens, Alien 2. The other one's okay, but it's something about Aliens 2. And then I love how when you started off for something like that, for each of the segments, it made you think. Like, I had to sit and think each one of those, but it wasn't like, okay, I don't get it. You do get it, but it was just like, oh my God, I didn't notice that before. It just made you part of it instead of just watching it. Like you're participating in the entire movie, trying to figure out what to do next and how it goes. How were you guys able to to create something like that, but make sure it stayed cohesive along the way, as well as give references to some of the most famous horror movies out there, but still keep it entertaining where people, wasn't like overthinking. It was a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anthologies are hard, and so Cameron and I, we're writing that whole core story that I'm directing, but each of these segments have to be very specifically curated to fit within this bigger picture that we're making. So, how do you, and one of the things we talk about is you can have a horror reference, but it has to be, moving the narrative forward. So we don't want to stop and be like, look at this. We want that to be part of the story. And it can still be completely and utterly ridiculous. Like Sam's head can come off the top of a TV, like a Dream Warriors thing. But then that also is still him. That's how he's navigating what's happening in the room. And that's how he's communicating the things that need to do. And we just keep him in that scenario, which becomes a funny set piece. That's an homage without there. But with Welcome to the 90s in particular, Alex Barreto she's a wonderful writer-director, is good friends with Cameron, my producing partner, Ashley Sneed. And she made a short called Lady Hater that we loved. And, when she asked me what she was looking for, I thought, she had some interesting takes on horror in general. And I was like, lean into that. Let's talk about Final Girls. Let's talk about the transitions of Final Girls and what that could be. And then let's create archetypes that can then be thrown in a scenario they've never been in before. And Alex just wrote something really brilliant and wonderful. And Cam and I were there kind of making sure, Cam was even the first AD on that segment too. Like we're there making these little pieces, fit together the best we can. And then as to the opening about those characters, I remember, she wrote about, Ellen as in Ripley, and she wrote, about, there's even a Laurie character and Ginny and all these different ones as far as what they could be from, Friday 13th Part 2 and alike. But we decided to put those little cards up, those names that were there to like help kind of drive them home. And it was fun to like come up with suggestions of Sally, for example, which is a Texas Chainsaw reference, and it's like loves to scream, Texan. And you do these things, oh, this is very clearly a Texas Chainsaw thing, but it gives you this kind of like fun, kind of way of entering into it. But that's credit to what Alex had created in this world she had built that we could go in and kind of like, again, mold to make fit within what it is that we're doing at the same time. Right. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, but it was hard, and we had to do that with each segment, each one had to, now the last segment Cameron and I wrote, We're So Dead. So that one we could like navigate a little more seamlessly into what we were doing. But the others, we want to give those filmmakers their freedom to kind of do it their way and write their kind of stories while still being like kind of keep it this direction a little bit so it fits in the bigger picture. But yeah, it's tricky. It's definitely tricky.
Yeah, and I think with that one specifically, with that segment, originally we didn't have all that text on the screen right away. It was a thing you kind of figured out as you went. But I think you don't, some of the jokes don't land if it takes you halfway through the segment to figure out who these archetypes are. Then some of those early jokes aren't landing. So putting that text on up front and getting everyone on the same page from minute one, I think helped make that segment a lot funnier and help the jokes land a lot better.
Completely.
Okay. I definitely get it. But I absolutely loved it because I paused it and was reading each one. I even wrote them down. I was like, Ellen likes cats, love big guns, hates face hugs. And I just like each one I chuckled because it was focusing on the key things that's what they are. Duh.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun trying to figure out what to put in there. We had a lot of fun.
So we followed Rad Chad. What was something that you didn't do in the first one that you had to do in the second one? And was that challenging to make that even relate to the entire series from the first and the second one because of time constraints or budget reasons or things like that, but you had to put it in the second one, or it was just like all new, fresh?
It was tricky. I mean, I will say, So we did want to do something different in the second one. So we kind of pivoted off some things. We wanted to kind of graduate into 90s and 2000s horror a little bit more. I will say originally we had ideas for a J horror segment in the first one that could be more like Ring Grudge-esque, and that didn't quite fall into place. And then the other thing that we almost did was, well, also found footage. We did look at found footage at one point, and so we did add a J horror segment in this one. That was Jed Shepard's segment, special edition, that kind of focused on that. And then there is a little bit of found footage when Kelly Maroney's character, Miss Kapowski, goes in that room where she like takes the camera. We do a lot of found footage tropes really quick. And then the other thing I would mention is actually sitting behind me is the puppet from the movie. Now, that made sense because Saw is so synonymous with this like talking puppet. So we wanted to make a Rat Chat puppet, which was fun. But then there is something about puppet horror that exists in Child's Play and, and all of this. So I was like, well, we have to do this now, So, but we did talk about doing a Child's Play segment type thing, in that world, or killer doll, if you will, that would play in the first one. But again, that's what's so great, because it's about horror tropes, and there's endless horror tropes. There's just so many, and subgenres of subgenres and things that you can play with. But those I think were the main. Was there anything I'm missing, Cam? I can't think of anything.
That and just the whole evolution of the final girl, and making sure that we had that that kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of final girl with attitude kind of transition, which is what Alex's segment Welcome to the 90s kind of hit. But yeah, it was really funny because we made the first movie and we didn't really think of it as like 80s centric. It could take place in the modern day, but when it started playing on the festival circuit, everyone was like, oh, is the sequel going to be like in the 90s, 2000s, or are you going to stay like in the 80s with the 80s stuff? And it's because we had so many like Nightmare on Elm Street references and Friday the 13th references and like slasher stuff that it just kind of felt that way. So it was really kind of only then that we realized that there was this whole untapped resource now in the sequel of these like 90s, 2000 centric, things like found footage, like J horror that didn't exist, early on, that we could really lean into it. So it kind of accidentally gave us a framework.
With so many different writers, how much influence did you guys keep into this to have it stay cohesive, but still give them the freedom to write whatever they felt? Like, did you guys just fill in the blanks in between as it wrapped around, as doing the wraparound story, or was it just completely freedom for them, and then you guys just cut and paste of what would be right for the story?
It was a combination of things. I mean, so it starts with a wild idea that Cam and I have, and then we're going out trying to find filmmakers that we admire, that we want to work with, right? So it's just people that like, oh, you could do something really cool with this, and like letting these super talented folks kind of come in. So, but we're curating it the whole time. So they're pitching us an idea, then we're kind of looking at that idea, we're whittling it down. We're saying, okay, that joke feels a little too broad for this segment, or maybe that's a joke we've already done, which happened a couple times, and we're constantly trying to kind of curate it so it all fits in the bigger thing. The way I like to think about it now, because I'm starting to work some, hopefully, in TV, and it's kind of like show running, where you have different directors that come in that are episodes of a TV series, but those different directors still have to work in the same show. And Scare Package is the same way. Like, we have these things come in, and we want them to have the freedom to kind of go off and do what they want, but we're reeling it in. So, we wrote the main story in the last segment, and then the other 3 segments, Welcome to the 90s and Anthony Cousins segment, that Annie came back again. Part 6, the night she came back, and special edition, we curated those specifically with them and talked about ideas and gave notes back and forth, and and that, so it became a very collaborative process, and again, it helped that we had made one already, because I mean, people don't even know, like in the first Scare Package, a lot of people don't know, in the first Scare Package, there was even a segment that got completely cut, and I still take I say that's my fault, because of we needed to better communicate how we wanted certain things to go. and how to try to make things kind of fit into the bigger whole. So you can have little diversions, but as long as it's still staying, like Jed's segment, for example, special edition, is a little more serious, but the concept is still so wild. That's about this urban legend of 3 Men and a Baby. So, but you can keep, and that still fits. That still fits in the Scare Package universe within that. So it's how you tread that water, and again, credit to Anthony Cousins, John Karskos, Alex Brito, and Jed Shepard, who can work within what Cameron and I are writing in the main story, and they're just so energetic, and they've got great ideas, and we're able to kind of develop these stories together.
Well, I think through trial and error on the first film and then into this film, we kind of stumbled along a way to kind of get everything on the same page without undercutting what makes these writers, people we want to work with in the beginning. And so what usually happens is we have the greater kind of story arced out, and we know kind of conceptually what we want to fit in that box, but we really do let the writers and the director kind of write their thing, and as long as it makes sense within reason. And then we don't really write the wraparound story until that stuff's been figured out. So we have an idea, we know that things going to fit into the idea, but we write the wraparound story knowing what their thing is. So we put that kind of on ourselves to make the pegs fit and to take the stuff in the wrap, and that's why we're able to integrate the stuff in the segments into the wraparound story in like a meaningful way, because that stuff's already been figured out in advance, and we're the ones kind of going last and putting it on ourselves to make sure we make it all fit in the same thing.
I want to talk about the gore and some of the practical effects and the special effects. I was just like, it was wild. I mean, it was blood getting splattered everywhere. I mean, the intestines and lungs, going back into the grave. I mean, the melting man. That should be a figure.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, you're really? Okay.
I want it. I want it. I'm trying to put it in the world.
Or it'd be something like you could make a concoction and you put the guy there and you pour it on him and he just like melts.
Oh, that's a great idea.
These are genius ideas.
We should write these down.
Yeah. Thankfully, you're recording. We'll come back to that.
But yeah, it's like I have to talk about that. It was, I mean, it was a lot of fun. It wasn't too much. It was just enough to move the story along. Because some movies you watch, they just throw anything in there for the sake of gore, and you're just like, why is his head exploding? It doesn't even go with any of this. Or with of why, but yeah, let's talk about that. How was that on set? Because I noticed quite a bit of practical. Was there was that on purpose, budget reasons, or you just wanted to have that feel of that whole nostalgic feeling?
I mean, I grew up in practical effects. This is what I love. That's one of we talk about working with the writers. We're like, you have to have gore. You have to have practical effects. You have to have these things that are there, and even Jed's segment, well, he's dealing with J horror, which gets much more into the VFX kind of era and what's happening. I was like, yeah, but you need to make a monster, so he works with Trevor Henderson to make this monster guy that's all practical. So yeah, this was, it's vital. I think it's part of the DNA of Scare Package is that we really go for it in practical effects. It's interesting because I was actually a little worried that we didn't have enough practical effects in Scare Package 2 compared to Scare Package 1. I thought there needed to be a little more even at times, but then people are still like, oh my God, there's so much. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's interesting to kind of see. I mean, we do skin Graham Skipper's character Dwight alive, and he stays skinned the whole rest of the movie and stuff like that. So
I think we integrated it better this time, so it doesn't feel like as much, but then when people watch it, I think it feels like more to them.
And I'll tell you who it felt like as much. David Greathouse and Nate Bright and Prithvi Patel, who were for the key story, our makeup effects team. It definitely felt like a lot for them because they were working nonstop, so dedicated. David Greathouse, we've worked with many times before, and is just a complete pro's pro. And he had made the witches for me on The Pale Door, and we brought him in for this. And yeah, just really, he did the Goo Guy again, and that was having to, the Goo Guy originally was done by Tate Steinset, who, oddly enough, is who created this puppet, because Tate worked on the Puppet Master new film a few years back, And I was like, well, then you're the person to create the puppet. So it made sense. But he had created the goo guy with Eric Zapata, and then they couldn't be on set to do that. So he had to like, mimic another effect done by another effects artist, and that's always tricky. And what was there, and then in particular, you talk about going back on the grave. Ryan Shadley, who is a creative partner of Anthony Cousins, is just like one of the most talented makeup effects people on the planet. We've worked with him a couple times, and just his attention to detail is so superb in what they did in both the original segment in Scare Package 1 and Scare Package 2. I'm just hats off to him every time. It's so good. So, we were always pushing that forward in every way we can and trying to like push the envelope. And it's like, okay, well, if Rich Sommer from Mad Men can get his arm vomited off, like, then he needs to stay the whole rest of the movie with one arm, and it's like we just put ourselves in a corner and it gets really difficult, but that makes it more fun. It's just part of what we have to do in every way. Yeah.
Okay. Is of all the segments, do you guys have any of personal favorites? Because I do.
Oh, it's
like some the ones that you worked on. Like, I know the whole movie is your favorite, but as far as like, is there one that, oh man, I really wanted it in there and I got it in the film and I absolutely loved it? Was there a part of that was just like a signature part that you just absolutely loved that was in the film? Because I could tell you right now, welcome to the 90s, because, I grew up, born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. I totally get it. I absolutely loved it. Now, We're So Dead, I was laughing because to see kids in adult situations in adult movies that really, except for It or Stand By Me, but for as like Reanimator, I was like, oh, that's from Reanimator.
Aaron and I were doing prep on a movie called Old Man with Lucky McKee, and we were just in an apartment in New York, like doing prep, and we just had this, like, I don't even remember who had it or where it came from. We weren't even really working on Scare Package at the time. We just had this idea for like a Stand By Me style segment for Scare Package where basically these kids are getting into crazy, like, unbelievable shenanigans, and all the mom cares about is that they don't curse and that they take their shoes off and stuff like that. And we just thought it was such a funny thing that we kind of wrote that just on a whim on like a weekend, and then really liked it, and we kind of started searching for someone to make that one, and we landed on Rachel Wiggin. And so then we like had this weird thing where we were like, does this even play in Australia? Can we make like Saddam Hussein and Sunny Delight jokes with Australian people? We had to go in and like Australian it up and stuff. But yeah, that one's I have a soft spot for that one just because the concept is just so funny to me, and I think Rachel did such a good job with the script she was given. And that one, I know it's cheating because I helped write that one, but I have a real soft spot for that one.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel elevated it. I will say,
sure.
like she took this idea that we had, and I could say the original idea was based on, I loved films where kids are doing things and the parents are oblivious to the craziness of the kids that's going on, and I thought of that as a trope. It happens all the time, and I think of the things that even my brother and I, the hijinks that we got into as a kid, that if my mom ever knew, she would cry. She would just cry if she knew all this stuff. So like, what is the extreme version of that? And I think it started with like a Reanimator thing of like kids working in a basement and doing these experiments. And then I was like, wait a second, there's this great trope within the Stand By Me kind of framework, which is Stephen King, so it's like it kind of feels in our world, and that would be a really fun kind of framework to put that in. And then we were off and running, and yeah, we just stayed up all night, a couple nights, just writing it. We were stuck in Brooklyn during the pandemic, prepping for this other movie, and yeah. So I mean, I love that. I will say, I'll pick a different one then, because again, they're all special. But I think what Anthony did and the night he came back again, part 6, the night she came back, I thought it's just so funny. I really love the Loomis-esque character that's coming in, the Dr. Castle that's monologuing, and he's got the mic that's not working. I remember we were doing the sound design at the end. We're finishing up the movie, and the whole time we've only heard him talk normal the whole movie, that we're at the very end, and then we're finally tweaking it to make him sound funny, and then we were dying. Like Alex Uding, our producing partner and editor, him and I were sitting there just losing it over this, and it was such a funny idea. And Anthony and John Karsko, his co-writer, are just so talented, and they get these great performances out of everyone all the time too. And Chelsea Grant, who plays the main final girl there, I just think she's so animated. Like she feels like a Wile E. Coyote character in some cartoon, and the way she like gets her teeth all big and stuff. I just think I just love it. I love it.
Yeah, like I said, the entire time I was really enjoying it, and it just brought back so much nostalgic feeling. And also, like I said earlier, like I was watching it and I would write down, oh, I think it's from that movie. No, it's this one. Okay, I know it. Okay, I see Nightmare on Elm Street. Like you're going through it, trying to figure it out and figure out what's going on in the movie, as well as the characters, the story. I mean, you're along for the ride. It's not just a movie you just sit there and just like, be cooking and cleaning and doing stuff. Like you're sitting there and you're engaged. You want to know what the hell is going on, and you want to know what movie that they're referencing. But it's fun. I mean, yeah. we need something like that. Is there a movie reference in the movie that no one has gotten yet?
I would say no one's gotten it, and this may have been the one Aaron was going to talk about. But there's a My Girl reference in the where she says he's not wearing his glasses, he can't see without his glasses. What's funny about that one is every screening there seems to be like one person who laughs at that. Like every time I've seen it in the theater, it's just like we found the one person in every, like we finally whittled the references down to where one person per theater gets it. It's just so funny. That My Girl reference is like the most obscure.
Yeah, it's at the funeral at the open where she's opening, and it's all this chaos
when the smoke.
And that was a scene, and I wrote that in because it was just something that it's actually a scene in My Girl that makes me cry every time. And she's looking at him and she's crying. It's a sad scene, and I was like, we're in a funeral, all this chaos. It'd be really funny to cut to her doing that. I just thought that would be such a funny thing to do. So, but definitely some folks have caught on that. I mean, the one that I would say, there's two in particular that like I don't think everyone's quite gotten. There's one where Graham Skipper is he's getting ready to vomit, and he says, or it's just those damn enchiladas, which is a Friday the 13th Part 5 reference.
Oh yeah.
Where he's like, they're about to like do it in Friday the 13th Part 5, and then he gets up and he's like, oh, and she's like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, it's those damn enchiladas, and he runs away, like, feeling sick. And I was like, oh, if you're sick, then I got to work this in. So that was one that not everybody, I don't think everybody's quite, which is fine because this again is part of our.
Wait, didn't they say that in Scary Movie? Too?
Honestly, if they did say it in Scary Movie, then I don't even remember. I don't even know. Everybody talks about
the preacher he was on the toilet and he was like,
I'm afraid to go back and watch the Scary movies because I don't know. I haven't seen those in so long. I have no idea what they did and didn't do. So there's got to be some amount of overlap.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I have no idea that they did. To me, it was just Friday the 13th Part 5. But yeah, I mean that's where that came from. That's where that. So if they did, they tapped into the same thing, which is probably why some people reference it. Then, yeah, I mean, we're looking at it, I believe, from a little bit different angle. But I will say the other one is Dwight, again, Graham Skipper's character. He's doing this dance, and he's like, okay, I gotta keep the bees out, and you gotta keep busy. And as he's doing that dance is Crispin Glover's dance from Friday the 13th Part 4. And if you looked at them side by side, the moves he's doing and that cha-cha, like all that.
I'm more surprised that doesn't get more. I thought that one would have been more obvious.
Well, we cut away from it. I wish we could like sit there and just watch him do it like a long push in, but we needed to keep the propulsiveness of it kind of going. But if you were to watch him and you see all his moves, and then you look at Crispin Glover in Friday the 13th Part 4. I love the Crispin Glover dance is something I've referenced since I was a kid. It's just such a funny. I mean, I have a Friday the 13th Part 4 tattoo. It's one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite sequels. And just his dance in that is so wild to me. It's so absurd. So I gave it to Graham. I was like, Graham, you have to start practicing this like now. You know, you got to get these beats down. And it's like 100 degrees in this warehouse. And he's just pouring in sweat. And he's like, I can keep going. So at the end where he's like, I don't think it's working. And he's exhausted. That's him really exhausted. And
Oh,
he's like,
wow.
I'm kind of done. Yeah. So, but that's one
see,
too.
now I need to go back and watch all the Friday the 13th. But anyway,
Is there ever
I need to
really
go
a
back
final
and
movie in that series?
No.
Friday the 13th goes for some wild directions.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they go some crazy directions.
Well, that's so much of what we were doing in this is that, you know, and I think and some people were like, this is, I literally was listening to a podcast just a couple days ago, and they're like, this is stupid. It makes no sense. This wouldn't be possible. And I'm like, that is that's whole
the joke,
point.
man. Like,
That's the joke. Like, it just went right over your head because so many of these horror sequels are just continually retconning what's happening before them. They ignore the previous thing, and then they try to like force something in, and we're like, well, that is so silly. How do we do this and have fun with it at the same time? Because again, fun is the North Star for everything we're doing. But
here I thought we dropped enough breadcrumbs that people would know it's not a drama. But I guess we need more. We need more.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I've watched enough horror movies where it's like, well, we forgot everything before, so we're not doing it. But
Yeah.
I could tell you a franchise that did do that right now, but that's a whole nother segment.
yeah. But I mean, I enjoy it though too. You know, Jamie Lee Curtis can cut off Michael Myers' head in H2O, and they can say, "Oh, it's just the ambulance driver," you know, and like it's like what, you know. So
talking about that.
oh,
You
well,
read
sorry.
your mind.
I mean, it's what happens. You know what I mean? It's what happens. And then you just then you do sequels to things that are already have sequels. You just act like those sequels don't even exist. Like
That's the new trend, right? That's like that's Scare Package 3 maybe. We'll start doing like weird sequels that's a sequel to Scare Package 2 but not Scare Package 1 or some crazy nonsense.
It just doesn't make sense, but yeah.
Might got something there.
Yeah. We'll just confuse these people even more, you know, who aren't getting the joke, and they're just going to get more and more frustrated, you know. But look, I mean, it's just meant to be silly fun because I think a lot of these movies are silly fun, but I love them. They mean a lot to me, and we love these horror films so much. So, you know, it's like, how do you find a way to homage them, but then, you know, and I challenge anyone who says that we stop. There's one moment where I think we stop and show a scene, which is there's a mimic of Drive where Bert and Kurt kiss and all that, that scene. But other than that, everything else is narrative based. You know, if a reference happens, that reference exists to move the story forward, you know, and I think that was a fun challenge and an interesting way to approach it. And, you know, so, and I will say too, we are for the Blu-ray, which will come out, we don't know when yet, but, and just within a couple months, I'm sure, because I know this is later January when this is coming out, but we're going to have a version of the film that's kind of like, if you remember VH1's pop-up video back in the day.
Yeah.
We're doing pop-up video, but with horror references. So you'll watch the movie and they'll pop up and tell you all the references that are in here. And I can say, I think the last time we finished that spreadsheet, it was, is it 150?
It's more than that, I think. What's crazy is we keep watching it and going through, and then we go back to check it, and then we realize there's more references we didn't write down. It's like, you ask if everyone's gotten all the references. I don't know that we know all the references anymore. We knew them at one time when they got made, but I'm sure there will be a few that sneak through even that thing, and we've been working on that for a month.
Yeah, I already know of stuff we missed. I already know stuff that's going to be in it because we finalized the version now, and I just thought of things that are not there. So, but it's because there's so much that we piled in, and we wrote this over, you know, a year and a half, right? As far as time, because you're doing segment, and all this, and and there's ways that like the clothing can be a nod, dialogue can be a nod, set pieces can be a nod, names can be a nod, music can be a nod. You know, so there's all these different ways that we do it. And but yeah, that'll be a fun thing for people to see, and then you can check it out, and you'll be like, oh, here's all the other Friday the 13th references, because there's a lot scattered throughout the entire thing.
Oh wow, that sounds like a lot of fun. I definitely want to see that too. But and always I want to tell people, be kind, rewind. And now, I worked at Hollywood Video. I get it.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to say thank you. Thank you so much for this. It was a lot of fun, a lot of information to know. And I really do appreciate it. This movie is a lot of fun. Everyone, check it out. Scare Package 2, Rad Chaz Revenge. I like that. It has a little movement to it.
Even the title's a joke.
If you haven't seen the first one, check out the first one. It's so fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having
us.
Thank
you. Yeah, you're wonderful.
Everyone
thank you for all the support. Yeah.
Oh, of course. And everyone out there, please like, subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment. Definitely check out Scare Package 2. I gotta say it again. Rad Chaz Revenge. Oh, watch, I'm being in my sleep. Rad Chaz Revenge. Okay. Thank you so much. Until next time. Bye, everyone.